Hello, everyone. Five Star Real Estate, Kim Anderson and Tracy Johnson teaching today one of your power sessions, one of many we've been doing, but we're so glad that you're all here today. Whether you're watching us live or you're watching us recorded sometime later, our intention of power sessions is just to bring a topic to each of you that we can really lean into and dial in a little bit to just sometimes it's just language, sometimes it's hearing a story that later when you come into I'll call them problems, they're opportunities for growth today for what might happen in the future. So we're so glad you're here.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. So we're just going to dive right in. We're starting a new sessions from now until Labor Day, just a new topic. And the topic for these power sessions will all be around protecting your client in the transaction. Our last series was on the relationship, and this one is more on protecting your client. Some of you may find it's might be a little simple for you, nothing new, but it's always a good reminder. And we're sharing as a broker support team some of the things that we have experienced, some of the things that we see doing over 6,000 transactions a year, and just the things that will protect you along the way and help you not to have a big oopsie right in the middle of your transaction. Um, so let's get started. So great agents do more than just write offers and schedule closings. As a real estate professional, we're going to help you, or it's our job to avoid problems, understand the risks, and protect our clients from surprises that derail the transactions, damage the trust, and create experience. And raise a hand. Anybody ever had a problem to overcome when you're doing a transaction? Or a thumbs up? Ever had one, right? So we are problem solvers. That's what we do. The minute we work with the buyer, yep, lots of thumbs up. We should always be looking for that problem that we can overcome. And not that we want them, but when they come up, our brain should kick into how will I resolve this? How am I going to handle this? So clients they hire you like as the pro, just like they do their accountant, just like they do their attorney, just like they in any other business. So Tracy, what does it mean to be a pro?
Yeah, I just to expound a little bit on what you just said there again, we are licensed. We have a professional license by Lara. Like we are licensed, just like an attorney, a doctor. I mean, people that do your hair, they all have to have a professional license. So I really want you to think about what you're doing as the professional. When you have the opportunity to get in front of a buyer or seller, they are coming to you because you know more about something than they do. So whether you're new to industry or whether you're somebody like Kim or I, who's now been in the business for a while, we are learning things every day ourselves. And so as a professional licensee, we have to show up to things like power sessions so that we're continuously leaning into ourselves and becoming a pro. But one of the things that I find is much different in the business, probably in the last 15 years, I'll say, than was prior to that, is something called dot loop, which allows our buyers and sellers to contractually enter into agreements, not only with us as realtors and brokers, but with our clients as as our buyer or seller. How many of you, just by raise of hands, do all sit with people in person and have them sign on paper?
There's
Okay,
one.
Patty Styberski does a little bit. Tammy does some. Did I see any? I see Rory.
Rory.
He's got a
Yep.
thumb up. Okay, maybe
Michelle
there was
Brown.
somebody else I
Yep.
missed.
Michelle. Yep.
Okay, so some of you are still sitting with your clients in person. The biggest thing that happens in person is exactly what's happening here. You have an opportunity to explain things to the people that you're in front of, right? Here's the contract. It's a big old document with lots of pieces and parts. And so
Yep.
when you sit with someone in person, you have an opportunity to walk them through. And when you do that, whoop, it just brings the temperature in the room down, right? Because they are signing something that they're not familiar with. If
Yep.
you're like the majority of everyone in the room, Kim, would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yep. It's
Yes.
our job to be in front of everything that's happening in the transaction. I do not like it when my client has to ask me something before I had a chance to explain it to them. I'm constantly communicating, constantly in front. This is what's up next. This is when the earnest money's due. This is when we're going to schedule or what works for you for scheduling inspection. So I absolutely do agree.
Yeah, yeah,
It's our time to
exactly.
shine.
Yep, it is your time to shine. And you know what? If you don't do it up front, this is what it's about today, avoiding problems. So what we do today helps avoid things down the road. So be the pro and figure out how to be a good communicator. And being a good communicator starts in the beginning. So if you're not like the handful of people that raise their hands at the beginning, that sits with their clients when they're signing things, how are you going to do this? Like, how do you explain this? Do you jump on the phone with them and say, "Hey, Joe, I just wanted to let you know I'm sending over the buyer agency contract. When you have a minute, can you give me a call so we can go through that together?" Or, "Hey, I just sent over this purchase agreement for the $750,000 house you're going to sign. Just go ahead and sign that, and you'll be good to go. I just trust me." But that's probably not going to work. It could work, and it probably does work for some people. They just send it over and magic, the buyer just signed it off. But a pro looks at opportunities to get in front of people today so they become your raving fan forever. And
Mhm.
they're going to tell their friends and family. So establish a way that you're going to communicate purchase agreements, buyer agency contracts, listing contracts to your buyers and sellers. Um,
Mhm.
I have a way that I do it. In fact, Lexi Sutherland's on my team, and Jack might be here as well. But she just said to me, "Hey, I'm going to update our offer summary because we just got a new purchase agreement that we use in the Metro Detroit area. So we call it the offer summary. What we do is we take the entire offer and we break it down, number one, two, three, four, and so on, all the way to the bottom. And we take that sentence and we just break it down in such a way that the buyer can see, oh, number one is this. Oh, that means this, right?
Mhm.
And guess what? We have AI today. You could take your purchase agreement, you could put it into AI and tell it to give you a short explanation of each one of those paragraphs inside your purchase agreement. Kim, do we want to trust everything that AI tells us?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But it's a good start. So you can upload your contract into Chat GPT or AI, and it will give you a summary. But you really do want to check that. Example, I put in West Michigan Regional Purchase Agreement before it was just changed to the new way of practicing where the seller cannot terminate during inspections, and it did not find that. It
Mhm.
did not tell me that. So that's my one story. Always check. And if you've been going to the Deal Doctor Roadshow, we're talking about AI. So one of the things that I do after 24 years, I still do this, and I'll tell you, I cringed. I cringe when I hear an agent say, "I have to sit down and explain this to them." I'm like, ah. And so it is your job as a pro, the same as if you were going to see an attorney about a situation. You're going to sit with them, you're going to talk with them. And this broker support team is here. Why? Because we have problems in contracts. And over 6,000 calls a year is a lot of calls. So this may seem a little simple to you, but that's how you do good real estate. So what I do is when I have a contract, I talk to my, say I have a buyer, they want to write a contract on 123 Main Street. We talk about what do you want? What's your earnest money? How much do you want to offer? And we get our thoughts together, and then I will tell them, I'm going to go and write this unless I can meet with them in person. I realize we don't do that very often. Now, I've just had two extreme clients. One that's over in St. Joe, and they're not physically present here. So we did everything by phone or by Zoom. And I have another elderly couple who I did everything handheld in the office, right? So you get all different kinds of clients. You want to make sure that everybody understands. That's the key. And what's up next? And we're going to get to that in a minute. But what I'll do is I will fill out the contract, send it to them in view only. So now I have a track record that I didn't just send it over and say, here, Mr. and Miss Buyer, sign this. Because if there's a problem, that will not be in your favor, right? So I send it over in view only, and then I say, when can you chat? We'll get on a Zoom, we'll get on a phone call, and we will highlight and I will explain that contract to them and the timelines from beginning to end. That is what we should be doing at the bare minimum for every contract.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because if there's ever a problem down the road, now we have dot loop, which is the digital footprint of everything that's happened to every document. So over next to the line item of every document, there's three little dots on the right. When you click on that, drop down to history, and that tells us the client says, I didn't get it. But I can see that you viewed it at 7:27 a.m. this morning.
Mm.
So maybe they accidentally deleted it, who knows? But that's the reason you do it. So that if you have problems later, you did send it as view only, and you did do that early, and you did call them and go over it. But there's just even my offer summary that I do, we do send that through dot loop and offer questions. Let's get on a call together, whatever. But we do it separate from the purchase agreement. So it's not, there's a lot of emotions in the minute. Can everyone agree to that? When you get to the point when your client finally wants to write the offer, there's a lot of emotions and they're wanting to click really fast, which is great, but it provides a lot of opportunity for things to go sideways if you don't feel like you've explained it. And you're showing your value, right? You're
Right.
the pro. You control all the documents. This is your opportunity to shine. So if you haven't sat and got really good at walking through the document and explaining it to someone, call someone on the broker support team. We'll walk through it with you. Practice with your spouse, your best friend, your kids. Doesn't matter. You just need a listening ear, right? But I would just encourage you to do that.
Yeah, and one example comes to mind is as you're talking to your client, when all the emotions are high, there's competition. One
Mhm.
example that comes to mind is they want to waive inspections. As a pro, it's very important to explain why you should or should not. And my answer was always, you should not. So then, even if they do, my answer was, you should not, right? Because there's a big difference between the day that you write the offer to win and the day after closing when the furnace quits running. Big gap there.
Mhm.
So, one of the ways we protect our clients is by having them sign an inspection waiver. So, these are all a lot of small details that will help your transaction go smoothly. It'll get you from beginning to end, no surprises, because when a surprise does come up, example, one recently, go to the house and the sprinkler system is leaking. Then you're not all maxed out because now I can deal with that, get to the proper people to get that fixed prior to closing. So just simple things. But if you have five, six, seven, your buyer or seller might wonder, what are you doing? Do you even know what you're doing here? Nothing
Yeah,
better than I get to the end of a transaction and my client says, literally, you are the best realtor in the world. That's
yeah,
the raving fan that we're looking for, right? And
absolutely.
even after closing, I have an elderly couple that I'm like, you know what? Let me get you some names for to change your bathroom into a accessible bathroom, whatever that means. But that's how you continue to build raving fans is by
Exactly.
helping them and being upfront. Yep. Tracy, what's the one
Yeah,
thing?
I was just going to say, what's the one thing? What?
Well, if it's not in writing, we're
It
going to
didn't
talk about
happen.
that.
It
It
didn't
didn't
happen.
happen.
If it
Yep.
did, if it's not in writing, signed by all parties, it didn't happen.
Right.
Mhm.
Yep.
What about Ginger? We'll get. I don't. If you have a question, we'll catch that at the end. Okay. Um, I was just going to say this. When do you start talking to your clients about money? Whether you're on the buy side or you're this or the sell side. Kim, what do you have to say about that? Didn't you have a story about that?
Yes, in the beginning, I always sit down and explain to them right from the get-go because I've had, especially first-time home buyers, that they've saved up their down payment, they've got enough money to finally buy their house, and then they look at you and say, oh, when you say, okay, how much earnest money? You don't want to be down the road that far and say, how much earnest money do you want to put down? You've gone through the trouble of winning. And now there is a lot, there's 1,000 or so that could come out of their pocket before they ever get to the closing table.
Mhm.
So it's very important to explain earnest money. Nope, it is not required. Is it encouraged and pretty much expected? Yes. Do you have $400 for a home inspection? How much do you have for earnest money? What about home inspection, pest inspection, sprinkler inspection, or chimney inspection, all those things. So I explain that up front. Now, if I have a client who's bought and sold many times and we know they're financially we probably you have to read the room and who you're talking with, right? But especially brand new first time buyers, they need to understand all of the parts of this contract and what's coming up.
Yeah, I always explain to those first time buyers, I always call them buckets. Like you need these buckets of money, right?
Mhm.
And the first bucket is that earnest money deposit, appraisal, and your inspections. And you just have to talk to your clients about this. They don't understand. They think that, well, I need my 2%, 3%, 5%, whatever down, but they're not thinking about lender related costs. So
Mhm.
how are you explaining these things to your clients? If you're on the sell side, are you explaining all the fees associated with selling your home, right? These are
Right.
real
Net sheet.
costs. Yeah,
Yes.
it's not, who said not cheap?
I did. No,
Yeah.
net sheet.
Net sheet. Yes, net sheet. If you're not using the Star Title One app, I mean, I know we have some new agents here, like Tammy, she might, have not seen our Star Title One app, but it's phenomenal. It helps buyers and sellers set realistic expectations about what those things look like at closing. A true pro even has those initialed or signed that I gave you an indication, highlight, estimate, right?
Mhm.
Um, Ask good questions so that when we're down the road after the emotions of we won are over, let's remember what we did in the past to set us up for success in the future.
I'm thinking of one story. I had a client last fall that had been saving and saving and had, 50, $60,000 for his first home, worked really hard. And guess what? When there was a election change, because he didn't care for what was happening in the election at that time, he pulled all of his money out of the bank. Guess what? You got to have your money in a bank for a lender, right? Well,
Yeah,
first first let me back up. First he started out. So this is why that buyer consultation is so important because you're uncovering things. So you can get in front of it before you ever get right in the middle of the transaction. So when I first met with them at the library in Pawpaw, I drove out there, we sat there, right? Or Lawton, one of the two. And that's where you discover things is in that consultation. So I realized I found out he had no credit, a lot of cash, no credit. So then right away we got on that, getting him a card, a prepaid debit card, got him with the lender. You don't just say, "Oh, well, I can't help you." You find ways to move them forward and they become really strong buyers. So then he did everything I told him to do. He got a prepaid credit card, he built all his credit. Then I get a little further down the road, which he didn't mention his cash wasn't in the bank. Now he has all this cash. So now we had to get the money in the bank and be able to move forward. So you never know what you're going to uncover until you start talking to them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, exactly, exactly. There's just so many things that need to be communicated
Yes.
inside your purchase agreement that when the excitement is there, get forgotten later. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, a call that we might get routinely might have to do with possession.
Mm-hmm.
When was possession to be delivered to the buyer after purchase? Well, we gave the seller 30 days at $0.00 because we needed to do that to win, right? But now the buyer already has the new carpet picked out and the painter lined up, and they want the date, like today, when that seller is going to get out of my house, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the funny thing. Well, the seller doesn't, I always say, expect the worst, hope for the best, right? We gave them 30 or 60 days, whatever it was. Expect that they're going to be out on that 60th date. And if it's anything shorter than that, perfect. But set expectations early for things like this as well, because there's nothing worse than having the buyer close, having offered 60 days possession at 0.00 because that's what was required in order to win. Only to find out that the buyer is blowing your phone up because you didn't set a realistic expectation about when the delivery of that key might happen.
Mm-hmm. And there's just so many things. And just as a little disclaimer or a note here is some of these over the next several months, we're going to dive deeper into possession. We're going to dive deeper into the forms a little bit more. But so we're staying pretty general today, but it is important to explain agency, buyer agency, fiduciary responsibility, all of these things, they all come wrapped in it together. Um, and like when you write your contract, did you put the personal property in there? It goes deep and deep and deep. And one mistake, I've always told the story. Have you ever had to buy a water softener? I did. It wasn't my mistake, but did I buy the water softener? I sure did. Yep.
Hmm.
Tammy's shaking her head. Yes. So we're going to dive into more of these, and this 30 minutes always goes really, really fast for us.
Hmm.
So, Tracy, let's get to a couple more things, and then we can take a couple questions too. So let's see. So we're going to talk about, and it's important to ask the questions. Is this your homestead? Is this going to be an investment property? Because that all affects their bottom line. It affects their taxes. What else do we have here?
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you too, is that, understand where to get the information from the taxes.
Right.
If you're helping a buyer, a first-time buyer, this has happened so many times. If you're helping a first-time buyer buy a house that the previous owner has lived there 20, 30, 40 years, that taxable value is really uber low, which
Mm,
means their taxes are uber low. But when that sale happens, we call that the uncapping of the taxes to the new state equalized value. That community is sitting back tapping their toe, waiting for some of these houses to uncap, okay? Because
mm,
they know that when it does, the community is going to recapture some of the monies that they feel they're due to provide goods and services to their community. And they do that when homes sell. Then they reset those taxes to today's rate. And sometimes today's rate could cause a buyer to not be able to afford the home. And a lot of times, lenders, I don't know why this is, but they pre approve the buyer on the taxes for today.
mhm.
Well, if the buyer was kind of on the edge of a pre-approval, they may not be able to afford the house once those taxes uncap. They show up at the community knocking on the door, really upset that they raised their taxes. But there were two people that had the opportunity to be a pro and lean into that buyer and help them understand about what will happen with those taxes in the future. So the state of Michigan has a website, Kim. It's the Michigan Property Tax Estimator. That's one way to go. It is behind. I think if you went to it today, it's estimating taxes from 2024. So
Yeah.
you need to know what the current tax rate is, but you could also use it as an estimate. Circle that and let them know, hey, this is from 2024. I would encourage you to call the assessor or the treasurer's office of the local municipality to get some more information about what might happen when these taxes uncap.
Very important. And I actually download that and drop that in their loop once I share that with them. And I add on the percentage. There's nothing, well, yeah, it's not good when you get the call afterwards and they all of a sudden find out their budget was tight and all of a sudden they can't buy the condo. I had a couple situations. One of the homes I just closed, the seller was a veteran and they weren't paying taxes.
Mhm.
So, like I said, we're going to dive into some of these things, but just remember there's a lot of things. And if you're newer, you don't know what you don't know. So, very important to be calling broker support team, calling, hanging with other agents because you're going to pick up some of these things that are happening. One of my stories many, many years ago, maybe 2010, 11. I had a buyer that, I was all excited. They were lived in Chicago. They were going to buy a condo for their son here while he went to school. And we kept kicking the can and kicking the can. And we find out just before, 3 weeks down the road that the condo wasn't warrantable because it was a second property. And those are the things, when you see the word condo, you should have a whole list of questions you're asking before you ever write the offer. Where's the information sheet? Do you have an information sheet? Because there is one at least in Kalamazoo, there's a dot loop. If not, we can help you get the list of questions before I even list a condo. I send those over so that when Kristen clicks on my link and wants to show the property, I have everything ready. There's so many things you do to be proactive that just keeps it moving and moving and moving along the way. The other thing I wanted to say about home inspections, remember, it's not limited. there are certain things. So, for example, sell a house in March, probably the sprinklers aren't on. Do we want to inspect the sprinklers? Yes. Every broken head could be $100. So understand pools, sprinkler system. Some may do just a preliminary on a chimney. What about a sewer scope? These are all the things when we want to just whip through this contract and just get paid, it doesn't work well.
Yeah. And those are also things to think about during inspections. Kim mentioned a few of those things. Like definitely make recommendations to your buyers for things like this. I mean, a new sewer line from the house to the street could be $15,000. Okay. Now you have a first time buyer with that bucket, right? They've dumped all the money out of their bucket and the bank can't handed it back. It's empty. So I've had a client have a sewer line fail. They could afford it, but those are not fun phone calls to get. Nobody
No.
likes to get a call from a buyer after a closing with bad news.
Right. A couple of things too on financing, and we have so much more information that we'll just have to continue as our classes move along. But one is explaining to your buyer. Now, once again, read who your client is. You're not probably going to say this to somebody who's been established and bought two or three houses, but for newer people, but you still want to have even a cheat sheet or something that says, don't go buy large appliances. If their credit is close, they're looking to you as the advice giver. They're looking to you to be the one to help them move along in the transaction. So you want to be upfront with anything that could potentially be a problem on this transaction. And we all know every transaction is completely different. We just need to walk through because when we walk through the contracts, it's going to bring up curiosity for them and questions, and you'll be able to get in front of a lot of these things. So, don't change jobs. Are you going to are you going to live in the property afterwards? All those questions all mean something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So I see some questions coming in. I feel like we just have to kind of stop midstream, but I want to be
yeah.
able to get to the questions. What do we have for questions, Tracy?
Yeah, one person just said, "Hey, this is great information." Basically, I didn't get this kind of training at my other broker. Thumbs up on that. I gave the link to the Michigan Property Tax Estimator.
Yeah.
It's a great tool, but
Mhm.
don't hesitate, downloading information from BSNA, but these are the kind of tools that are available on Saturday night at 10 o'clock, on Sunday morning at 11 when your local community is closed. Or maybe you're working in a small little village that's only open from Monday to Wednesday from 9 to 11 every day. And you're like, it's Thursday. Oh my gosh. Because this never
Right.
happens, right? It happens a lot. So, yeah, any questions? Anybody? I remember Ginger had a question in the beginning.
And while she's putting her mic on to ask the question, I was just thinking of another story. Same house I sold last fall. It was out on acreage. One thing that I noticed when I pulled it up on GIS mapping that the house was on the property line. Those are the things as a pro that we're there to see for our clients. And so I did due diligence. And at the end of the day, we ended up getting a survey and the house was okay. But I could not sell that property and the GIS mapping lines were off, but I couldn't sell that property to my client without knowing if we had a problem ahead of time. And everybody I called ahead of me that told, oh, it was fine on that transaction. Oh, it's fine on that transaction. Well, it's not fine on this one, right?
Yeah.
And so you just always want to be the person to ask more questions because that phone call afterwards is never a good one. One more thing at that same home, we were at the walkthrough and oops, and and the big truck was coming to move the pod. Well, guess what? That pod, he drove over the where the well is somewhat located.
Mm,
Those are things we just don't ignore. Those are
yeah.
things that we dive into and make sure that things, and I won't get into how it was never a problem, but what I did. So, Ginger, what is your question?
I actually have two.
Okay.
Should I recommend two home inspections to a client?
I'll answer that. I probably wouldn't recommend two separate home inspections, but you'll recommend one home inspection. But oftentimes there are things inside the home inspection that a home inspector says, look, I'm not a pro on sprinklers. I'm not a pro on the pool. I'm not a pro on, sewer lines, things like that. So I'll call them. If you look at, a menu of services, when you go to a doctor, you could have all these different things done. There will be certain things like you're going to recommend if it's an older home. I'm always going to be recommending a sewer scope. If it's in a known area of radon, I'm really going to be encouraging the clients to have a radon test. So there are certain things that you will. And when you can always call the broker support team. We can give you some advice in these areas because I will tell you that depending on the home inspection company, guys, everyone with the nod of the head, they will let your clients say yes to every type of inspection they do. Yes,
Mm,
they do. Because they make money. They want them all, but there are certain things like if you do a VA or
mm.
they have certain like pest inspections, things like that. But I don't recommend all of them. But I know that my home inspector does not do sprinklers. He'll, tell you, hey, you need to call a different company to do that. So
And if you can't get them in, then you need to ask for an extension to be able to get that in. I've opened a pool in early March, and you just have to pay attention to the details. We won't get into all that, but I have done what it takes to make sure that property gets inspected. And the other thing I'll say is is that when I have a client that doesn't know who to use, we have a service provider sheet. You give them at least a list or at least three. And then what I personally do is I do call around, and my clients love it because they're busy. I call around and say, okay, here's Aardvark. This is their price. This is when they're available. Here's when inspector number two is available. Here's their price. Here's number three. And then I have them pick. And then I say, fine, here's their information. I don't I don't authorize, I have them call or connect with that seller. Seller can give their credit card, but I do services like that too, and they love it. They love it. I'll meet the
Okay.
sprinkler out there for them. Okay, we have to
any
wrap
other
up.
any other
Ginger,
questions?
Ginger said you had
Well,
two.
yeah. What if a client asks you about the voting that's coming up about property taxes?
Well, look at me stumble through my. I would just say at the end of the day, what's known is available is usually online. Our job is to direct them to the places back to the pro because we're not a pro on what might be happening locally. So I would direct them to the local community to find out what's happening and see if they can answer any of their questions. I would say that's beyond the scope of your license, but I would direct them to the local community.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, we're at 10:05. Good to see everybody today on a Monday morning. Hope you're staying busy, closing some sales. If there's not any other questions, we will see you next week. And I hope that you have a wonderful week with looks like beautiful weather. All right, everybody.
Sounds good. Take care,
See
everyone.
ya.
All
Have a
right.
great week.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.